Changes that will mainly impact mid lane and jungle champions in the buffs and nerfs and a lot of system changes. So let's get into the first champion, which will be the Akshan. It will lose some win rates, like 1% at best, because it's going to drop 20 HP and also have one cooldown plus on his Q. Eventually goes back into 5 as soon as you max it. So in the first few levels, it will be a bit weaker and be more vulnerable. So I would say it's probably 1% win rate drop. It will also be completely fine. So it's definitely not the end of the world for Phantasm or Akshan itself. Aurelion Sol, movement speed is going up by 5, so this is quite a strange way to buff the champion because his movement speed is already high on his base amount, which is 335. And now it will also have more burst damage instead of the mana cost change that they were showing before. So it's going to have 5 more damage. Basically, this is a nice change, but this movement speed part might make you play Aurelion Sol with only tier 1 boots unless you really need Mercury Threads or a specific amount of boots where you can take benefit out of the feats. Other than that, I think the amount is too high, so this, might be interesting for Aurelion Sol, but this is a weird way to approach the champion. Blitzcrank E will have less cooldown, so this will probably make you shift the second max into W because now the gap instead of 9 to 5, which is not a job or a full time, but it goes from 7 to 5, so maybe you will want to shift it to W max second, and this will create a lot of opportunities during early game, during laning phase for Blitzcrank, so having 2 less seconds will create a lot more pressure and chaos in favor of Blitzcrank in the bot side. LeBlanc, this might seem like a small change, but this is quite big for mid and late game transition because she will be a lot more vulnerable. She will have less 9 armor and she will drop 54 HP. So this makes her more accessible for assassins and the AD champions to punish LeBlanc in case she's exposed. So of course, LeBlanc wants to play and thrive through side lanes. She wants to play in Fog of War. She wants to make surprise picks. So she will still be strong, don't get me wrong, but she will be more vulnerable and you have to be extra careful, especially in solo queue when playing against champions that might want to burst you when they are physical damage oriented. So yeah, Skarner. Riot wants to buff him. I do believe that for the next competitive patch, we might shift into a meta where we bring back Skarner, Lily as an answer, Zara, or some AP champions that might be strong eventually. His AD growth is going up by 1. Bonus AD ratio on his Q is going up by 10%. The cooldown timer will start on last offensive Q action instead of the first cost. And the cooldown will drop by 5 seconds initially and then goes down into 4 instead of 7. So big cooldown drop for Skarner. Also, the damage is increased on his E because he has an added 120% bonus AD ratio, and the cast time on his ultimate is going up by 0.10. Okay, so overall, they want to buff Skarner, and it might be viable. Let's see how he lands in solo queue, but if he's viable in solo queue and strong in solo queue, well, it will be even stronger when it comes to competitive overall. Talon is going to be nerfed by 10% on his damage to monsters. That's great. I really hate to have Talon in solo queue, so that's awesome. And base armor from Volibear, I'm glad it was a typo before because previously it showed 55 base armor and now it's 35. Base attack damage goes up by 2. And the biggest change of Volibear, which I don't really like, is the fact that it's dropping a lot of movement speed. So minus 2% and then minus 4% of the maximum amount of value that it gets in total. So Volibear jungle will be heavily nerfed because even top lane Volibear will be, even though not as much in comparison to jungle, because Volibear wants to utilize this movement speed mainly in the jungle, but when it comes to top lane, yeah, it will of course feel this buff because the base stats, but when it comes to this movement speed, yeah, it's kind of a difficult leverage when he needs, and he's so dependent and so useful around this movement speed usually. Also, damage cap against non-champions will also be dropped in flat amount, but he will have it eventually back by the end, and also plus 70% AP to help on his clear after. Bane's damage going up by 5, so basically it will be 5 higher than Yasuo. This is trying to compensate for the fact that Doran's Shield, Second Wind are being nerfed because champions like Yone, champions like Hackali will be hit around this change, so they want to give him more damage. And yeah, of course, Yone likes some Q damage because he spams that ability. Biscuit Delivery going down by 0.5% HP, maximum HP. To be fair, quite a sizable change, especially for bruisers and tanks in the top side, even though other roles can take this rune. Cashback maybe sometimes will take this rune, but 2% is not enough for you to always go for this rune. It's not like it's an OP status, but it's a sizable buff depending on an item. Maybe you get 60 more gold here and there, so it helps when you finish an item, but it's still not enough to be like that OP selection that you want to take every single game. Warning, basically, they want to increase the amount eventually in early game, not too much, but they want to give it more shields eventually, and also in 10% AP. So basically, enchanters that want to build AP, they will be happy with this change. They will get more value out of this rune. Of course, usually AP enchanters don't really stack a lot of AP, so this won't be felt as much, but it's still a buff for the squishy type of champions to avoid them from being all in or just getting poked down. Ale of Blades plus 20%. Champions like Echo Jungle, maybe it will be showing Pike, bot lane as soup. Maybe it shows range champions will still have the unchanged amount and the unchanged value at 80%, so it will be the same for the range champions. Won't be tweaked on that matter. And the lifesteal per stack will be a small change, 6% maximum lifesteal per stack. The maximum actually, and 0.4 per stack, which is the right amount. Movement speed will go up by 0.5 on the movement speed chart. For those who don't know, it's the middle row where you get DMS instead of adaptive force or the scaling HP. Basically, you might want to get in some champions where you don't want the adaptive force, the movement speed, if you really value the movement speed a lot. And speaking about movement speed, yeah, Nimbus Cloak, the users that usually bring Nimbus Cloak will like this change because you get more movement speed eventually. But the champions that don't really use Nimbus Cloak will not use Nimbus Cloak regardless. Phase Rush users such as Ryze, for example, will not like this change at all because you drop 25% of the slow resistance. It's quite a sizable nerf, I would say. You lose 33% of the value that you had before. So even though it will be, a must rune for some of the champions because of how they function thematically, it's still a big nerf when it comes to the raw amount that you lose. Tenacity, you get 5% more. Okay. It's a nice little buff. And Avarice bonus gold, you get 20 free gold just like that. And then the adaptive force, instead of being 20, now it's 30, and by level 6, maybe you will get more solo kills because of this change and because of this buff. So maybe you will not go for Biscuit, and maybe you will go for the triple tonic just to try to land some more solo kills at level 6 maybe. And for solo queue, it's great. And even for competitive, maybe if the amount is still here, because the Biscuit changes and the inspiration tree changes, maybe you might shift more often into triple tonic. Mainly champions like Syndra and champions like that. It makes me think that those champions want to pivot into triple tonic. TLDR of the patch, once again, Akshan, it's a small nerf, maybe 1% because the early game nerf. Aurelion Sol, weird way to buff his movement speed. Burst damage is a nice way to make Aurelion Sol more reliable, especially in early stages. Blitzcrank, really huge buff for the champion, creates more opportunities for laning phase. Maybe you pivot into W max second. LeBlanc, mainly a mid-late game nerf because she will be more vulnerable. Skarner, Riot wants to bring him back into the meta, so maybe he will be strong in solo queue, and he will be even stronger in competitive if he doesn't get nerfed until then. So maybe we see Lilia coming back and some AP champions to try to answer into Skarner. Talon, really nice that they decide to nerf him. I hate this champion when I face him in solo queue. Volibear, mainly a top lane buff, but a huge nerf for jungle, and even slightly for top lane Volibear because he drops a lot of movement speed on his Q, which is the main strength of Volibear, of course. Yone earns 5 damage because of the second wind and orange shield nerfs in the previous patch to try to make up for it. Always nice for a spammable ability. Minus 0.5% max HP on Biscuit Delivery. Mainly hits tanks, but of course other champions and roles that want to take this rune will also feel this quite slightly. Cashback, not enough for this to be OP because you get like 60 more gold, depending on the item that you actually buy as a legendary, so not a huge change for cashback. Guardian will be better for AP type of champions. Even enchanters that don't really stack much HP, much AP, will still feel this change quite a bit. And of Blades, some champions like Echo, Pike might show up more. There are more examples, but ranged champions will not be affected and will remain unchanged in the total attack speed value. Bloodline, it's not a huge change, only goes up by 0.75% maximum life steal. And movement speed, this is quite nice. You get more MS on your shard in the middle row. Nimbus Cloak will also be buffed for its users, but you will not be incentivized to bring other new users into the rune. That is not how it's going to work. Phase Rush, it's probably the biggest nerf of the patch because you lose 25%, 33% of the total amount, right? But champions like Rise will still want to take Phase Rush. They're too dependent on it, too reliant on this option, so they will feel this change. Tenacity 5%, it's a nice buff, and Triple Tonic gets a huge buff because it goes up by 10 adaptive force, and you get 20 free gold essentially. So let's see how this patch lands. The year is almost finishing. You get a nice Benepal luck skin. As usual, Riot wants to make some more money, but it's for a good cause as far as I know. We'll donate 100% exactly, so yeah. Hope we see a nice patch. It's starting to shift more into systems, but I'm curious to see how it lands for 25 and 23.